The whole town of Greystone Crossing, Alberta knew what happened behind the walls of the Halverson Ranch, and not one of them said a word about it. The constable knew. The land registry clerk knew. The women at the general store who watched Mira Trent walk in with her eyes down and her sleeves pulled to her wrists, they knew too. And every single one of them looked the other way, because Roland Halverson had been grazing cattle on that land since before most of them were born, and in Greystone Crossing, land was the same thing as law. Mira Trent had come out from Red Deer at 23, chasing the idea of a life that felt like something. She had grown up with not much. A rented house on the edge of town, a mother who worked double shifts at the textile plant, a father who left when Mira was 9 and sent birthday cards with American postage that arrived 2 weeks late. She had learned early that the people who said they would take care of you sometimes meant something else, entirely by the word care. Roland Halverson was 41 when she met him. He owned 4,000 acres of ranchland in the foothills west of Greystone Crossing, a timber contract with a company out of Calgary, and a reputation for being the kind of man who got things done without being asked twice. He was not handsome exactly, but he had a way of making you feel like the room tilted slightly in his direction when he entered it. He shook hands firmly. He remembered names. At the church social where they met, he brought her a cup of tea without her asking and said quietly that she had the kind of face that made a place feel warmer. Mira had been 23, and she had not known yet what it meant when a man studied you that carefully before he'd spoken 10 words to you. They were married inside 8 months. Her mother cried at the wedding, and Mira thought it was happiness. By the end of the first year, she had begun to understand the shape of her life. Roland did not hit her in the beginning. That came later. In the beginning, it was smaller things, things that were easy to explain away, easy to fold into the story she was telling herself about what a marriage was supposed to look like. He didn't like her spending money without asking. He didn't like her calling her mother too often. He didn't like the way she laughed at certain things, open-mouthed and too loud, he said. Not becoming. He said it gently. He said most things gently, which was part of what made it so hard to name. She stopped calling her mother as much. She started laughing differently, or not at all. By the second year, she had stopped driving into town alone. Roland said it wasn't safe on the gravel roads in winter, which was true, and so she let it go. Then spring came and he still drove her. She told herself it was just habit. The ranch hands came and went. They did not look at her directly. She understood, slowly, that they had been told something about her. She was not sure what, exactly, but she could feel the shape of it in how carefully they avoided her eyes. One of them, a young man named Cody, who couldn't have been more than 19, had stopped her once near the barn to ask if she was all right. She had said yes, she was fine, thank you. That evening Roland told her Cody had been let go. He didn't say why, she didn't ask. That was the year she started keeping money. It was not much. Coins from the grocery change. A folded bill here and there from the household account when Roland was away at the timber office in Calgary. She kept it in an old tea tin she buried under the loose board at the back of the tack room, wrapped in a cloth that had belonged to her grandmother. She did not have a plan for it yet. She only knew that having it was the part of herself she was keeping. The hitting started in October of the second year. She remembered it clearly because the first frost had come early that autumn, and she had gone out in the morning to check on one of the mares who was close to foaling, and when she came back inside with mud on her boots. Roland was standing in the kitchen waiting. She had tracked the mud across the floor. He said something about the floor. She said something back. She could not remember now exactly what. Some small, ordinary thing. And then his hand came across the side of her face, and the world went white for a moment, and then came back sharp and ringing. He apologized that same evening. He brought her a cup of tea without being asked. She did not call her mother. She told herself it would not happen again. This is what she told herself. The same way she had told herself other things over the past 2 years. And she almost believed it each time because the alternative was understanding something about her life that she was not yet ready to understand. It did happen again. By the time the third year settled over the ranch like a second winter, Mira had become very skilled at 2 things: staying quiet and waiting. She did not know what she was waiting for, exactly. She had no particular faith in rescue. She had grown up understanding that help was not something that arrived on its own. But she kept adding to the tin. She learned the patterns of Roland's moods the way you learn the roads in a place you've lived long enough. Not because you love them, but because knowing them keeps you safe. She was 26 years old, and she had not spoken to her mother in 4 months. The man who changed things was not what she would have imagined, if she had let herself imagine anything. His name was Cormac Bridle. He came into Greystone Crossing on a Tuesday in late March, driving a pickup truck that had seen better decades, with a border collie riding in the passenger seat and a set of farrier's tools in the back that looked older than the truck. He was somewhere in his late 30s. It was hard to say exactly, because he had the kind of face that had been weathered by outdoor work into something that could have been anywhere between 35 and 50. But his eyes were clear and unhurried, the dark greenish-gray of water under heavy cloud. He rented the small room above Hutchings Feed and Grain for $40 a week and introduced himself around town as a farrier looking for seasonal work, which was true as far as it went. Mira first saw him at the feed store, which was one of the few places Roland still allowed her to go alone, because it was close to the ranch and the owner, old Mr. Hutchings, had known Roland for 30 years and would report back anything worth reporting. She was loading a bag of mineral supplement into the truck when she became aware of someone lifting the other end without being asked. She flinched before she could stop herself. The man set his end down on the tailgate and stepped back, not quickly but deliberately, giving her the distance. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to come up on you like that." She looked at him directly for the first time. He was not looking at her face, she noticed. He was looking past her, toward the truck, giving her a moment she hadn't asked for and didn't expect. "It's fine," she said. "Thank you. Cormac Bridle," he said. He didn't extend his hand. "I'm set up above the feed store for a bit. Farrier work." "I know," she said, and then felt strange for knowing. "The town talks. Towns do," he said. He picked up a bag of his own, nodded once, and went back inside. That was the whole of it. She thought about it on the drive home and was not sure why she was still thinking about it. She did not tell Roland about the man who helped with the feed bag. There was nothing to tell, technically, but she had learned that even nothing could be made into something in the wrong hands, and so she stayed quiet, and she kept going to the feed store on Tuesdays, because that was when the mineral supplement came in, and sometimes Cormac Bridle was there and sometimes he was not. Twice he helped her load without being asked and stepped away after. Once he was sitting on the bench outside when she arrived, drinking coffee from a thermos, and he looked up and said good morning, and she said good morning back. His dog came and pressed its nose briefly against her knee, and she put her hand on the dog's head without thinking, and then felt something in her chest that she couldn't name, something that was partly grief and partly something older than grief, the memory of being a person who touched things without calculating first whether it was safe. She found out later, from the woman who ran the post office, that Cormac Bridle had grown up on a ranch outside of Pincher Creek, that he had worked all over, BC, Saskatchewan, parts of Montana, and had come back to Alberta after his older brother died of a thing that went undetected too long, that he was not a man who stayed in one place for very long, but he also was not a man who left a place before it was time. In April, Roland fired one of his long-standing hands over a dispute about the pasture fencing. The man's name was Old Dewey, and he had worked the Halverson land for 11 years, and when he drove off in his truck he did not look back at the house, but Mira watched from the upstairs window and thought about what it meant to leave without looking back, and whether she would be able to do it, and whether she would survive it if she did. Roland hired Cormac to fill the gap, because Cormac was available and came recommended and was cheaper than most. Mira found out on a Wednesday when she looked out toward the near paddock and saw the border collie sitting alert by the fence post, and knew before she turned her eyes the rest of the way. She did not react. She had become very good at not reacting. Cormac worked the horses and kept his own hours, and did not come inside the house except twice, both times to relay something to Roland about the water line near the east pasture. He was polite to her in the way that someone is polite when they understand that being anything more than polite would cost the other person something. She noticed this. She did not know if she was supposed to notice it, or if noticing it was a thing she was doing wrong. Roland noticed Cormac the way he noticed most people who worked for him, with a kind of measured attention that was less about interest and more about calculation. He watched how Cormac moved around the land, whether he talked to Mira directly, whether he took liberties. For the first 3 weeks, Cormac gave him nothing to watch. He was simply a man doing a job, thorough and unobtrusive as the weather. The evening it changed was in early May. Roland had been drinking since mid-afternoon, which was not unusual for Fridays, and he had worked himself into a mood over something to do with the timber contract. She never fully understood the specifics, only the temperature of it. Mira had made dinner, and the potatoes were soft in the way he didn't like, and he had said something about it, quietly at first, and she had said nothing, which was usually the right answer, and then he had said it again, not quietly. She was still at the table when the back door opened. Cormac had come to leave a note about a mare with a stone bruise. He came in the way he always did, 3 steps and a stop, waiting to be acknowledged. He stopped, The air in the kitchen had the particular quality that air gets when something bad has just finished or is about to start. Roland looked at him. Cormac looked at Roland and then, briefly, at Mira. Stone bruise on the bay, Cormac said. His voice was level. Kept her out of the near paddock. Wanted you to know. Leave a note next time, Roland said. I will, Cormac said. He looked at Mira once more. Not the look of someone cataloging damage, but the look of someone marking a location, the way you mark something on a map you plan to come back to. Then he went out. Nothing happened that night that hadn't happened before. Roland went to bed in his anger, and Mira sat at the kitchen table for a long time after, and outside the window the May dark was soft and enormous and full of the sound of the creek. She was not sure what to make of being seen. She had been not seen for so long that being seen felt dangerous, like a light in the wrong place. But she thought about the tin under the board in the tack room. She thought about how much was in it now. She thought about the woman at the post office who had said once, without any particular context, that the bus from Greystone Crossing to Calgary ran on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 7. She started being more careful. Not in the way she had been careful before, not careful to be small, to be quiet, to disappear into the wallpaper, but careful in a different way. The way you are careful when you are actually planning something. She made note of things. Which nights Roland was in Calgary. Which of the hands stayed late and which went home. Where her identification documents were kept, and how quickly she could reach them. She found out from Cormac, not by asking directly, but by saying she'd heard the roads were bad in spring and him saying yes, the road into Lethbridge could get cut off when the melt came fast but the highway east held up, that there was a women's shelter in Lethbridge that she had not known about. She did not know how he knew she needed that information. She did not ask. A week later she said to him, while he was working near the fence and she was supposed to be checking the water line, I have money put away. He didn't stop working. That's good to have, he said. In a tin, she said. In the tack room. I know where the tack room is, he said. I don't need help, she said. He looked at her then, briefly and directly. I know you don't, he said. That's not what I'm here for. She looked back at him for a moment that felt longer than it was, and then she went to check the water line. Her hands, she noticed, were not shaking. Roland did not fire Cormac. She had expected him to, had been braced for it, in the way she braced for everything, quietly, and well in advance. But something had shifted in Roland that she didn't fully understand, some quality of watching, like a man who has noticed something at the edge of his land and is waiting to see what it does before he moves. It was Cormac who told her, one afternoon in the third week of May, that her mother had called the feed store looking for a number for the ranch. He said it simply, without preamble. He did not explain how her mother had found him, though she thought she understood. Her mother was a woman who had worked double shifts her whole adult life and did not give up easily on things. Mira did not say anything for a long moment. She sounded like she had been trying for a while, Cormac said. Mira looked out at the mountains to the west. In May they still had snow on the high peaks, and the sky behind them was the particular blue that Alberta only gets in spring, so clear it looked fragile. I'll call her, she said. The store has a phone, he said. Hutchings doesn't ask questions. She called her mother on a Monday. It was the first time they had spoken in 5 months. Her mother did not say, I told you so, which was the thing Mira had feared most. She said, I have a room made up. She said, I have been waiting. She said, you just tell me when. The day Mira left, Roland was in Calgary. She had planned it the way she had planned the money, quietly, carefully, in increments, without telling anyone the whole picture. The border collie was tied near the barn, and as she came out of the tack room with the tin in her bag, the dog stood and watched her with the particular attention dogs give to people who are doing something that matters. She did not stop to pet it. She had learned not to stop. Cormac was at the paddock gate. He did not say anything, and she did not say anything. He had her truck keys in his hand. She had asked him 3 days before, in the same oblique way she had learned to ask for things, whether he knew the best route to Lethbridge in case of emergency, and he had said he did, and she had said, I may need someone to take the horses out to the east field on Wednesday morning, so Roland doesn't worry about them being unmoved, and Cormac had said he could do that. He handed her the keys. She looked at him. I'm not looking back, she said. You shouldn't, he said. She drove east on the highway while the morning was still cold and pale, the mountains behind her going gray in the rearview mirror, the road ahead opening up the way roads do in Alberta when you're moving away from the hills, wide and flat and full of distance. The kind of distance that doesn't feel empty but possible. She stopped once, at a gas station outside Claire's home, and sat in the truck for a moment with the engine running. A family was loading into a minivan at the next pump. A kid about 7 or 8 was wrestling a bag of chips and losing. The ordinary life of it, the total unstudied ordinariness, made her eyes fill in a way she hadn't expected. She blinked it away and pulled back onto the highway. Roland called her mother's number 2 days after. Mira knew because her mother told her, sitting at the kitchen table over tea, without alarm in her voice, the way her mother had always delivered hard information, plainly and without drama. He had been polite on the phone, apparently. He had said he was concerned about Mira's well-being. He had said she hadn't been well. Her mother had said, "She's fine. She's here." There was a pause on the line, her mother said, and then Roland had hung up. He did not call again. There were papers filed 3 weeks later through a lawyer in Lethbridge who had been recommended by the shelter. The process was not simple and it was not fast, but it moved. The way things move when you have evidence, when you have been keeping careful record of what a person has done to you over 3 years, when you have photographs you took yourself in the bathroom mirror over 26 months that you emailed to a secondary account, Roland did not know existed and that had sat there quietly, patiently, waiting to be useful. She had kept those too. Not just the money, all of it. She did not go back to the ranch. She did not need to. Cormac Bridle left Greystone Crossing in June, as the town had always expected he would. He stopped in Red Deer once, briefly, on his way somewhere further north. He had a cup of coffee at the kitchen table, and her mother fed him a piece of pie, without asking whether he wanted it, which he ate in the uncomplaining way of a man who understands an act of gratitude when he sees one. He and Mira did not have much to say to each other, in the end. She thought that was all right. Some things between people don't need language, because they were never really about language in the first place. They were about one person standing at a gate and another person walking through it, and both of them understanding that the walking was something only one of them could do. She stood on the porch and watched his truck go down the street, the border collie visible in the passenger window, nose to the glass. She watched until it turned the corner and was gone. Her mother came and stood beside her. "You'll be all right," her mother said. Not a question. Mira thought about the highway out of Claresholm, the pale morning, the distance that wasn't empty. "I know," she said. She meant it. It was not something she had ever been certain of before, that she would be all right, that the life ahead of her was one she was permitted to want, that 3 years of something terrible was a thing that had happened to her, and not a thing that defined the whole of her. She was 26. She was in her mother's house in Red Deer, Alberta, and the June light was coming through the window at an angle, and there was a cup of tea going cold on the kitchen table, and the morning was hers entirely, and she was learning, slowly, in the particular way that learning happens when it matters most. What it felt like to live inside a life that belonged to her. She went inside. She let the screen door close behind her. There was still a lot of road ahead, and she was not afraid of it anymore.